All right, so let's talk about first about your trip in Israel. A lot happening there as the administration seems to be backing away, the Biden administration backing away from their support of Israel. What were your observations while you were in country?
Yeah, incredibly painful to be able to be there in the season. It's obviously a war for anyone who's traveled in Israel before. You see lots of tourists. Obviously, those folks aren't there because it's a war going on. I literally traveled from tip to tip through Israel, was at the Egypt border. I was a half mile from Gaza. I was all the way up on the border with Syria and with Lebanon. People lose track of the fact that there's been 4,000 rockets fired from the north. Everyone's focused on what's happening in Gaza. But Hezbollah continues to be able to fire rockets, and they continue to be able to violate the UN agreement to be able to keep that buffer zone between Israel and between any kind of military force. It's amazing to me that President Biden is chastising Israel right now for them trying to be able to defend themselves from the attacks that come from Gaza. But I hear absolute crickets about Hezbollah and their march to the south right now and their militarization of that zone that's supposed to be demilitarized.
Yeah, Senator, I want to ask you a little bit about this double standard that the Biden administration is applying to Israel. They've ramped up their rhetoric and their pressure on Israel since the drone strike that killed, I think, 7 relief workers there in Gaza, and now they're demanding action. But history is a stubborn thing. On August 29th of 2021, as the United States bungled their withdrawal from Afghanistan, you might recall the Biden administration fired a drone attack, and it killed 10 civilians. And there was no action taken for those involved in that. So is there a double standard here being applied to Israel?
Yeah, there is a double standard. Obviously, it's a wartime. There are painful loss of life for civilians that are out there. That's the painful difficulty of any war in any place. We've experienced that as Americans, that we do everything we can to be able to protect innocent life. Israel is also trying to protect innocent life. At the same time, the Biden administration is putting pressure on Netanyahu to be able to have a ceasefire and to stop and allow terrorists to be able to remain in Rafah, when we know there are thousands of terrorists that are literally hiding out in that last spot. We really need to have pressure on Lebanon to be able to back up Hezbollah. We need to have pressure on Qatar. The Qataris could put pressure on Gaza and Hamas today and could release all of those hostages, but Qatar is choosing not to do that. So the pressure really needs to be placed on the people that could actually end this war. Rather than demanding Israel as a ceasefire, let's demand Hamas as a ceasefire. The Houthis have a ceasefire. Hezbollah has a ceasefire. Qatar uses its real leverage that it has to be able to get those hostages out. That's where the pressure should be.
But is it, Senator, the fact that Israel is the only adult in the room and the only rational one that we can put pressure on and who will listen to us, and the others won't, and so we just let them do as they please because we know we can't control them?
No, it's just the international trend. Quite frankly, the Biden administration is falling into the UN rhetoric right now of Israel is always the problem. If you go to the UN, Israel's always the problem. Israel's always the problem. The problem is Iran in the Middle East. They are the destabilizing force. They're funding the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. The problem are the Qataris right now, that they're not using the leverage that they really have. So don't fall into the UN rhetoric that this always Israel is the problem. Israel is our ally. We need to stand with her. We need to help in every way we can to be able to help in the threat of terrorism that's coming at them. But we need to also use our leverage out there and not just follow to the world voice.
Senator Lankford, you and I were on a trip to Israel probably about a dozen years ago, and I've been there multiple times. I know you have as well. This time when I went, remarkably different in that I think there is a real sense, maybe strangers coming up to me on the street just thanking me for being in Israel. There is a real sense that Israel is standing alone in the world, as America is their last friend. And in part, what I heard when I was there, representing really evangelicals in America, is that evangelicals in America are really the last ones standing with Israel.
Yeah, Tony, it's really stark. When I met with multiple different Israeli leaders there, they were grateful for American officials to be there. They were grateful to be able to hear people in America are supportive of Israel. We do want to end terrorism. We understand what it's like to be attacked in a threat of terrorism. And we also understand that when the protests were happening in Iran in the streets just a couple of days ago, they were stomping on Israeli flags and American flags. For some reason, there are people here in the United States that seem to just look away, and we've forgotten the lessons of 9/11, that there are people in that region that intensely hate our freedom, that intensely hate us as Americans. And as is often repeated, America is the great Satan and Israel is the little Satan, but they're really trying to be able to come after us. And we'll do that in every opportunity. So America actually strengthens the hand of Hamas. When President Biden steps out and pushes back against Israel and says, back up, what he's really doing is saying to the whole region, wait it out, and America will give up on this, and Israel will have no allies, and then we can run over Israel. So the folks in Israel that I talked to were really grateful to be able to see folks on the ground and saying, nope, there are Americans that do stand with you, including evangelical Christians and others, especially a lot of Republicans that are speaking out clearly to say we're going to stand with Israel.
So, Senator Lankford, main takeaway from your time in Israel last week?
The war is still ongoing. Threats of terrorism is still very real. We lose track of that here because it's not in the news as much, other than people just attacking Israel for anything that may occur there. But Israelis still continue to face very real threats. There's about 63,000 Israelis that have had to pull away from the northern border because of the constant attacks from Hezbollah. So we literally have internally displaced persons in Israel as well. And for those families that I've met with, that their loved ones are currently hostages in Gaza right now. They want those hostages freed, and it needs to be the Qataris and Hamas and those individuals that know where they are to be able to get them out and understand this war can come to an end when Gaza is actually run not by a terrorist organization and when those hostages come out.
Yeah, in the hostage situation touches almost every family in Israel. Everyone knows someone affected by that. Final question for you, Senator Lankford. This week, articles of impeachment may be coming over from the House. They're supposed to be walked over for the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. What do you anticipate coming from that?
I anticipate they'll come over on Wednesday. We'll do the actual swearing in the Senate on Thursday, and promptly Senator Schumer will try to table this. That has never occurred in American history, to be able to table an impeachment. And so that we'll have a protracted back and forth fight on the Senate, whether that we're actually going to have the trial at all, or whether like Democrats in the Senate are going to be, for the first time in American history, to say we're not even going to have the trial. We're not going to allow evidence to be able to come out. Quite frankly, Senator Schumer doesn't want to have a conversation about how chaotic the border really is, and he's trying to find every way he can to silence that.
Well, I would say I'm surprised, but I'm not. Under the Schumer regime, there's been a lot of first. Senator James Lankford, always great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.